Good evening, everybody. It is a true pleasure to welcome you to the excavation site of Bagno Grande here at San Casciano dei Bagni. It's a special day for us today. This is the night of the researchers, the bright night. And this is how we celebrate the beginning of a two-day presentation of the activities of the University for Foreigners of Siena. And it's even more a pleasure to be in contact, although virtually, with the James Simon Gallery in Berlin, where the bronzes from San Casciano dei Bagni have been displayed since the beginning of July. When we thought about how to create a narrative about the excavation, our first goal was to imagine, to bring the excavation into the museums. We are so grateful that our friends and colleagues in Berlin have welcomed this exhibit in a joint collaboration between German institution and the Italian Ministry of Culture. So here we are in this evening when the shadows of the evening are slowly hugging the sanctuary to introduce you to the stratigraphy and to this amazing context. Excavators, archaeologists, students have been working here hardly since the middle of June, sorry. So we are almost at the end of our excavation, and we have amazing new discoveries are coming out from the mud and from an area that's been enlarged throughout these recent weeks. But we'll be talking mainly about what you have on display in Berlin and how this narrative of stratifying one after the other, the bronzes, fit within this amazing thermomineral context. It's also, I would like to first of all introduce my friends and colleagues who will be presenting later, especially Dr. Emanuele Mariotti, the field director, who will be also bringing us into the sacred pool, the thermomineral pool that constitute the core of the archaeological site since at least the 5th century BC up to the 5th century CE. But also this project, which is entirely funded by the local municipality of San Casciano dei Bagni, by the University for Foreigners of Siena, and by the local superintendencies for the province of Siena, Arezzo, and Grosseto, and our colleague and co-director, Ada Salvi, welcomes you here. It's also possible through the general help of many different donors been helping our site and our project. So to all of them, and especially to the passion of young archaeologists, students that are here every day during the summer, we are able to present nationally and internationally the results of our research. As I said, this is a special place. It's a place that lives in a dance around the thermomineral spring, a hot spring. This is a site that lives, at least for the 5th century, from the 5th century BC onward, around a hot water spring. And this hot water is actually really hot. It's almost 41 degrees Celsius, 25 liters of water per second. And we know that it always marked the uppermost part of a system of springs. There are over 40 springs in the valley of San Casciano dei Bagni. This is one of the richest areas in Europe for the presence of thermal water and thermomineral water. So also much earlier than the Romans, we normally think that the thermal phenomenon is a phenomenon that is linked to the Romans. Now in this region, before the Romans, there were the Etruscans. And also at the time of the Etruscans, this place was particular. Different communities coming from many different sites were arriving here that actually now corresponds to the southernmost part of Tuscany, in a region that at the time, from the 6th century BC, belonged to one of the city-states of the Etruscans, Chiusi. Chiusi was one of the 12 city-states of the Etruscans, and this sanctuary, as many other sanctuaries, were related to a thermomineral spring. This hot water was sacred. Sacred for healing, as we will see in a second, sacred for the entire landscape surrounding it. We are in a special marginal, liminal location, halfway between different parts of Etruria. Front of me, on the other side of the hill of the river Paglia, there are the foothills of the volcanoes, the Amiata volcanoes, that slowly goes towards the south and reaches the sea, the Tyrrhenian Sea. That's southern Etruria. To the back, to the north, travertines of the hills, the Cetona Mountains, is the beginning of what we call internal Etruria. So we are in the middle, and this hot water flows up into the ground and marks the border between these two different regions. So we are at the border of Chiusi, and Chiusi used this site as a special marketplace and as holy place in order for welcoming pilgrims coming from everywhere, also from the seaside, into the internal Etruria, a kind of a business card for the Etruscan city. The first evidence dates to the end of the 5th century BC, and we're talking already about bronze artifacts, which were discovered much later and found into the hot water. But the first monumental evidence is probably an enclosure. An enclosure made of travertine stone, the local stone of the region, that encircled what was already a spring, a hot spring, in the core of this enclosure. We don't know what was going on at the time. Some elements, new elements, are coming out from the excavation of this summer, but we'll be able to present them at the end of the excavation. So I'm going to keep a little bit of a suspense about what we are finding now. But into the enclosure from at least the 3rd century BC, votives were offered in the form of bronze, metal. That's the key word to understand this spring. It's a hot spring that, as many other springs in Etruria, welcomes offerings, but especially made of bronze. Why this? It's unclear, honestly. We also asked to medical doctors that work on thermal sites, can you identify if there is a link between offering an object in bronze to the spring and to the thermal spring and some kind of medical practices? We don't know. What is certain is that the holy water into the pool at the center of the enclosure from the 3rd century BC and then in Roman time welcomed groups of offerings in bronze. As Emanuele will explain later, they do represent part of bodies, gods and goddesses, different representations of small figurines and statuettes. But what is not important, what they represent, is the quantity of metal that was brought by pilgrims, even from very far away to the shrine, and placed it into the water. Something terrible happened around the beginning of the 1st century CE. Probably what we think was a lightning bolt hit this holy place. We can say this because within the thermal pool, into the water, into the sacred water, at some point there was in the stratigraphy a thick layer of tiles with a lightning bolt in bronze placed into the tiles. And when we moved the tiles, that's where the entire votive deposit was found. For the ancient sources, for the Etruscans as well as for the Romans, if a lightning bolt hit a sacred site, this site, what happened in the site is that everything had to be collected, what was sacred and hit by the lightning bolt, and placed into a special area. They call this ritual the fulgur conditum, the bearing the lightning bolt. It's a ritual action that closed the previous phase, and then another structure was built on top. I'm at the entrance here of what we have to imagine as a small tetra-style temple, so basically a temple that has 4 columns on the front. Here I'm really facing the entrance. And this temple was built at the end of the reign of the Emperor Tiberius, or even probably at the beginning of the reign of the Emperor Claudius. So we are in the first half of the 1st century CE. That's a time of major transformation. On top of the earlier enclosure, this small temple was built, and the pool that was at the sacred pool was dismantled in its early version and built on top of it with new blocks, probably also reusing previous ones, and enlarged on top of the earlier deposition. So this is a time in which the temple was made of 2 parts. A part in front, as we will see in a second, I'm going to enter into the pool, into the temple, sorry. It was a welcoming area in which pilgrims probably would enter into the shrine. It will enter into the small temple and will face in front of them the pool as an open area space. But then you would have stairs on both sides, bringing to an upper level that was closed, And this probably meant that the water, the sacred water, was coming and flowing from the earth into the open space inside the temple, as they were recreating the idea of a natural spring. On this earlier transformation of the enclosure and then the creation of the small temple, the temple survives until the end of the 4th, early 5th century CE. This is a time in which, again, the sanctuary is transformed. The large columns that were holding the roof until that time were gently placed within the pool. Although destruction is the main word that identifies this phase, which is probably related to the Christianization of the region, and a place that was pagan, like this one, related to the thermomineral spring, couldn't exist anymore. At the same time, this act of closing and dismantling the sanctuary corresponds to a moment of protection of the content, because offerings that were Etruscans before and then Romans on top of the lightning bolt were then buried into the hot water, into the mud, and what had been there offered for over 900 years had been buried and protected by the communities. Everything changed, but the Holy Spirit, the holy water, remains important, so it couldn't be cancelled. Now, what happened in Roman times, we know it a little bit better than the Etruscan times. People will access probably the entrance of the sanctuary, and in Roman times, they were bringing something different than in the Etruscan times, although with one common characteristics. So when you move into the last section of the exhibition in Berlin, you would see a beautiful plateau on the side displaying almost 300 coins, mostly in bronze, some of them in silver, few of them in gold. Because in Roman times, during the empire, the most important offerings were represented by coins. As you can imagine, immediately see, in Etruscan times we do have statues, body parts, ex votos. In Roman times we have coins, but there's no difference in itself, because the main characteristic remains metal. And metal is always offered to the spring, to the hot water. So people will probably arrive to the entrance of the temple, and instead of facing the presence of a tree or one celle, so the sacred space and the sacred rooms inside the temple, in front of them, they would have a sacred pool. This is a space in which we don't know exactly what was taking place at the time, but we can imagine single faithful reaching the border of the pool and throwing their single offer. But it's more probable that this didn't happen only on a daily basis, but it followed the life of the reconstruction of the shrine. Living and building on a thermomineral site is complicated because it's very unstable, the surface. So many times during the end of the 1st century CE, in the middle of the 2nd century CE, during the end of the 2nd century CE, early 3rd century CE, so in different times, the building had to be rebuilt. Why? Because it was continually collapsing. All these important moments of construction and reconstruction were accompanied by the deposition of hundreds of coins. Into the pool, we almost found 10,000 coins, 9,967 coins. So it's a huge amount of metal, and we haven't finished the excavation. So this gives the idea that we are really facing one of the largest deposits of bronze into hot water. A major destruction took place into the late 3rd, early 4th century CE. This is a time in which the western part of the sanctuary was completely rebuilt due to a collapse of over a meter of the entire area. It is interesting that at that moment, when the wall was rebuilt, a very special artifact, a very special stone was placed within the wall. Only few letters were appearing, but last year, a student came to the excavation, to Emanuele and to myself, and said, we can see letters here. and we couldn't believe, and we were actually laughing about it. But actually, it was true. And when we were able to extract the stone from the wall, that was clear that it was a donarium. So it was basically a stone for prayers, for gifts given to gods and goddesses. And this donarium has a very particular inscription. It's not only in Etruscan, but it's also in Latin. It's a bilingual inscription that is saying in Etruscan that this place is sacred to Flere Avens, the holy hot water. And in Latin, it says that it's sacred to Fons Caldus. Why two languages? We are at the beginning of the 1st century CE. That is a time of strong transformation, what we normally call the Romanization. But what is interesting here is that for over 150 years, from the Roman conquest of this region, which takes place in 89 BC, to the early and the mid of the 1st century CE, so 100, 125, 50 years, here both together, Etruscans and Romans prayed together, in a way that it made also necessary to put in the stone and engrave into stone the idea that this was a hot spring, that was a healing place, sacred place, both for Etruscan and Roman. This is a place in which everybody was welcome. There is no distinction of who's a foreigner and who's a local. This is the character of most of the sanctuaries in Etruria and in ancient Italy, and it's a beautiful political message about antiquities. Now, of course, in this perspective, once we enter into the sacred pool and we descend for over 5 meters within the votive deposit, that's a time in which we encounter the layer with the tiles and the lightning bolt in bronze. When we started excavating, we didn't have any idea of what this tile could have hide. But once we started excavating, underneath the level of the tiles, there were 11 groups of Etruscan ex-votos offerings, mainly in bronze. And I will leave this to the explanation of the director of the excavation, Dr. Emanuele Mariotti.
Thank you, Jacopo. Hello, everyone, and the warmest welcome from me, also from the excavation team here. And so it's a pleasure, it's an honor. We are proud to be here, to have you, even virtually in this place. So let me lead you on a small walk on the edge of this incredible structure. The sacred pool is from Roman period. You can see now. So it's always a little bit emotional to walk on the edge of this sacred structure. This is the core of this huge system related to the thermal mineral spring, to the healing water. This is the core of the shrine. As told you, Jacopo, until now. So we are in the middle of this. In this structure is the Roman building built on the top of the previous Etruscan building, and in this center, in these few square meters, we found, of course, the Roman layer upper, and then the thick layer of tiles, and in this small area, all the bronze group, the statuette, figurine, and all the vegetal offering. So this is the moment when in the Roman period they closed the previous Etruscan pool. And what we found exactly, this is the right order about this. So we found a group of deities. We have Flere Avens, that it means Fons Caldus, representing in a female statue. It's exceptional, amazing statue of a female figure, and Apollo Archer you can see in this exhibition. And also many part of body in another part related to the oak trunk in the middle of the ancient pool. What is this? This is the ritual core of the Etruscan pool, where in the Roman period, at the beginning of the 1st century CE, they placed all the bronze group just to close the previous building after the lightning struck. And so we have first of all, 8 group of bronze with a different spot in this small area. But last year, we reached the beginning of this incredible ritual that they offer to us an insight in the Roman and Etruscan religion together. In the deepest part, we found, and now you have in the exhibition in the James Simon Gallery, the child with a ball in the left hand, with the Etruscan inscriptions, the tablet, the copper tablet with the story about Iunco Vergilianus, but mostly the most important, not the most important, but the real sign of the beginning of this ritual, the layer with 5 bronze snake. It's something incredible. The snake is the soul of the spring, the representation of the genius loci of this place. That it means we reached the beginning of this ritual between Etruscan and Roman period. We are still, that's incredible to say, at the beginning of this work, and also just to tell you, just to show you, we miss all the half part of this incredible structure under the modern building. So if you want to add something, Jacopo, let me know.
Once we reached the level with the snakes, it was clear that the entire sequence took place in a fast time. It was not something that happened along a long period, but it happened all in a consistent manner. Now, what we see inside the pool mirrors somehow what happens outside of the pool. As I was saying before, and as Emanuele was saying now, inside the pool we had metal together with some offers that are linked with nature. And nature also means the presence of these big trunks. But at the same time, there's absolutely no link to animal offerings, with the exception of eggs. Thousands of eggs in fragments, and a few examples that were entirely preserved. They may represent the issue of generation and the birth, that is one of the core concepts of the ancient pool. Here, the ex votos mainly represent body parts, but they also represent many organs that were related to giving birth, and also to the care of the youngest, to the first moments of life, infants and swaddles, and then infants started to be sitting, and then, as Emanuele said, the infant, the baby standing with the bowl. But if bronze is the core concept inside the sanctuary, the ongoing excavation, again, without saying too much, is bringing us to light the other half of the moon, when outside of the sacred space, terracotta and clay plays a fundamental role into the sacred area between the temple and the big temenous wall that we brought to light during the excavation. But in the same way, it will be interesting to hear something about how we envision the continuation of the excavation, because geophysics brought to light in the air outside of the excavation a new and amazing complex.
So we are in the middle of a very huge system. This system is related to 2 springs, the main spring, the Bagno, called it Bagno Grande, that we talked until now, and another spring not so far, 10 meters far on the south part. So we are in the middle of this big system, and on the south part, the sacred area, the sanctuary, the shrine continues with more basin, more drainage, more buildings, and so our next goal for the next year is to understand better the sacred topography of this place, and one few words more. So we still don't know how many is deep the ancient pool, the Etruscan pool, and we think and we hope it could be filled layer by layer, period by period, by other offerings in different natures, bronze of course, and vegetal. So as we say now, we are still at the beginning of this incredible job.
In this way, once we think about how the excavation is going to move, let's go to the entrance, how the excavation is going to proceed. We want to spend a few words about what happens around, because this project begins with the research agenda that the local community of San Casciano dei Bagni developed back in the 90s. That was the time in which the local mayor and the local council dreamt about having an archaeological project. And then the superintendency of Siena protected the area, and then the excavation began. And at the moment on the site, with the coordination of the University for Foreigners of Siena, we have students, we had more than 90 students throughout the season coming from over 30 international and national universities. It's a place that, as in the past, welcome different languages, different people, still welcome students who are trained in archaeology and care for cultural heritage coming from far away. So it's interesting to think that a small community of Tuscany meets with an international community. And as the excavation proceeds, the Ministry of Culture has bought and is preparing a beautiful museum that will be hosting the bronzes that you are now that you see in Berlin and then you are visiting today at the exhibit. It's important to stress that the brave idea was not to displace artifacts elsewhere, but to imagine their display in the local where the local community lives. Everything was created by the local community and goes back to the local community. At the same time, the superintendency is preparing a master plan for the creation of a big thermomineral park, an archaeological park in which the archaeology will meet and melt into the hot water. And at the same time, our university, the University for Foreigners, is preparing the project and always starting, hopefully in January or at the end of the year, starting works for the creation of a hub, of international hub for research, where we're going to host over almost 14 scholars coming from everywhere in the world, and to bring research, to continue research in this site. So it's a complex project in which different institutions, the local municipality, the archaeological office, the university, collaborates, and this collaboration results in the capacity not only of bringing to light statues and what you have on display in Berlin, but also to make sure that cultural heritage is alive for the local community, is alive for the national community and for the international community. So we hope that for many of you, this will be an invitation to come see the site and visit the site. Thanks to the local archaeological group, a group of volunteers, the site is always open, even in winter. And people could climb and walk into the field and reaching the archaeological site, in an immersive way that presents not only the site, but the project in its complexity, and as well as the archaeological landscape. So while you are passing into the cases, look at the inscription, looking at the snake, looking at the half body that were for the first time in display in Berlin, think that behind those statues, there is a community that is alive. A community of researchers, of young students, of young postdoctoral and doctoral researchers that every day here from June to October spend their life into the excavation, as well as a local community here of San Casciano dei Bagni, a village of 1,500 people that think that this past is their future. So it's a complete different way of perceiving archaeology, not as a mission of discovery, not as a treasure hunt, but as a project of cultural heritage that finds its own heritage, its own protection, its own history within the archaeology of a site. So we hope that this journey, although it was brief, it was a way to welcome you into the site. And we hope that there will be the beginning of a long sequence of presentations that will actually allow visitors to come and discover in a respectful manner this beautiful landscape. We'd like to thank Emanuele.
Thank you, Jacopo.
I would like to thank Ada, who wasn't able to be here today, and I would like especially to thank students for their participation on the excavation. And I would like to thank a lot. I know that there is Agnes and Nina there. There's Martin Maischberger connected. To all the colleagues and friends in Berlin goes all our respect, because working with them has been an amazing experience, a respectful experience each other, and it's really a wonderful international collaboration. And then we would like to praise the respectful way and the amazing way in which they've accompanied every single step of this exhibition. And we hope that for all of you, this is a goodbye and arrivederci, we would say, here in San Casciano dei Bagni. And at the same time, just let me say that this is also, again, our night of researchers, as night is coming by in a second. And tomorrow, our night of research is going to continue. The University for Foreigners of Siena, it's a small institution that wants to break borders between nations, between contexts, between different traditional ways of intending scholarship. So this is our way of breaking the borders, digitally, bringing Berlin and San Casciano dei Bagni together, and making sure that we are able, once again, to think about our future in a way that presents complexity, welcoming environment, places in which foreigners were welcome and were citizens of the past, as a strong political also message for nowadays in such a terrible time that we are living. Thank you very much.
Thank you.